Hello and welcome to Ink vs. Algorithm, the Writer's Pod. I'm your host and author, Mookie Spitz, and today I'd like to chat about the 2025 Indie Author Survey results. It's conducted by Richie Wollman over at Written Word Media. It's a terrific resource for indie authors. I'll put the link in the description. And this survey result was brought to my attention by Daniel P. Douglas, who is the nom de plume of identical twins Phil and Paul Garver. When they're not writing science fiction, conspiracy, mystery, suspense, thriller books, and screenplays, you can find them lurking on Substack, where I ran into them. I invited the dynamic duo onto this podcast. They'll be conversing with me soon. Be on the lookout for that. And in the interim, Phil sent me these survey results, and I found them fascinating. So I'd like to take you through them, chit-chat about them, at least on a high level. And I think they'll be illuminating for indie authors, for artists doing covers, for editors doing the editing, for book marketers and promoters, because it gives a lot of visibility into the hearts and minds and best practices and habits of over 1,300 indie authors from throughout the world. And if you're like me, at this point, you're coming off a Thanksgiving Day holiday. I'm recording this December 3rd, 2025. I tend to be a workaholic, so I'm either on, dopamine bursting, to the point where if there's a long holiday, I catch up on my sleep. So now I'm flipping back into my manic podcasting and blogging and writing and day job to keep the lights on. And a journey like this is a great way to jumpstart my own enthusiasm for my own work and my own marketing. I published a science fiction novel that I'm particularly proud of this June, and I feel a lot of what these respondents are feeling, both in terms of the terrific opportunity afforded by the mostly self-publishing industry, mostly digital, along with the frustration of a super crowded playing field. How do you get attention? How do you sustain it? How do you build up your own community as an indie author when there are just so many other indie authors? But I'm a believer in the rising tide raising all boats. As Greg Sorber, another indie author, mentioned on my science fiction and fantasy factory podcast just last month, there's way more readers eager to consume our content than there are indie authors writing those pages. So in that sense, we're all in it together. It's not a zero-sum or mutually exclusive game. And sharing these insights and best practices make all our lives easier, and I would think better. And with that, the networking, the connection between writers, and that's one of the insights that Richie shares toward the end of this survey. So let's begin at the beginning and take a high-level peek at what she found and what it means to us as writers, editors, artists, and readers who are curious about how this industry, this largely do-it-yourself industry, survives and even flourishes. Ready, steady, let's go. Richie looked at 13 distinct categories. And this includes everything from how authors published, what motivated them, how much they earned, their chosen genres, how many books they've published, in what format, where they made their money, how they sold, what they did for cover design, editing, marketing, their reliance on email, and how they felt about what they did and the kind of community that they were creating for themselves. So let's check it out. Based on the survey results, 77% of these 1,300 or so authors identified as self-published. 17% were hybrid, and only 5%, 1 in 20, fell into the traditional publishing camp. So the old school way of doing things, where you write a treatment, you write a draft, you peddle it around, you get yourself an agent. Your agent represents you. Your agent tries to sell you in a handful of publishers. You negotiate. The process could take years, and often does, and still does. And contrast that with uploading the PDF of your manuscript to KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, for example, and go through the few hoops there. It'll probably take you under an hour if you've got your cover done. And let's say it's a Sunday when you upload your document into Amazon servers. No exaggeration, by Wednesday or Thursday of that week, you could have the paperback book with its own ISBN number sitting on your desk. You have a link, you have descriptions, you have the distribution engine available to you through Amazon, or for that matter, through Barnes & Noble, at least a half dozen other self-publishing platforms that are pretty much equally efficient. Sure, they're going to take a cut, but an unbelievable opportunity to bypass the traditional gatekeepers of traditional publishing. You want to write? You want to be published? Then write and publish it. Now, the benefits are huge. You control the rights, the pricing, the packaging, super fast. And then you can experiment with your own forms of outreach. And we'll cover those in a second too. But the flip side is the onus is on you to make your book pop, to build community, to cut through the clutter of what amounts to over 100,000 self-published books every single year. The good news is anyone can publish. The bad news is just about everyone does. So if you got the mettle to do it, and you're up for the challenge of trying to cut through the clutter, or if cutting through the clutter isn't really your goal, but you just want to see your words come to life, then self-publishing is a dream and a nightmare come true. So what motivates folks to do this? Well, according to Ricci's survey results, 40% are in it for the money. They want to make money, usually extra money, usually moonlighting, I'm assuming, especially starting out, and figure that they can do it in this kind of way. Now, is the ROI proportional to the effort? Well, we'll take a look at how they feel about the results. They're certainly not selling crypto, or maybe they're also selling crypto, but nearly half do it for the money. at least as their primary motivation. 20%, or 1 in 5, feel like they've got a story they want to tell. So it's personal, it's creative. It could be anything from sharing my grandma's memoir to writing a historical narrative to seeing one's name in print and getting it out there. Just about everyone has had the dream of writing a book. One of these days, I'm going to write my book. Sitting down and actually doing it narrows that funnel. But now, with the facility that I've just described, more and more people are doing it and getting it done. Now, about 16% of the 1,300 or so respondents want to become famous. So they don't just want to write their book. And I'm tacitly assuming that by being a well-known author or becoming famous doing this, they want status, they want to be acknowledged. And with that'll come some coins, right? So that kind of Venn diagrams into these other categories as well. And 15% want to do it as a hobby. It becomes inherently and intrinsically worthwhile just to write a book and publish it. And then about 9% are in the other category. And I'm not sure what else is left, but there you have it. I'm also not sure about how honest folks are in terms of presenting their motivation. I mean, if you're just in it to win it for the coins, would you boast about that as opposed to, well, I just love to write? Hard to say, but based on my experience with writers, selling my book at LA Comic-Con, networking on social media, connecting folks, like with the twins on Substack, this distribution feels about right. And the overall conclusion is some are in it to win it for the money, and with the money is a claim to fame, some kind of acknowledgement. But the real breakdown is, do authors look at their publishing like a business, or they look at it like a vanity project? And I think this is critical because it influences just about everything else shared in this survey. And when you talk to indie authors, you can really feel the energy in two categories. And here I could share just my own experience. I got invited to that LA Comic-Con by the science fiction author Ingrid Moon. She was gracious enough to share half of her table space at the event. And Ingrid, not to speak for her, but she's expressed to me and her own fans that her goal is to be a famous, popular, and successful science fiction and now fantasy author. And everything she does is to that effect. And the best practices that she shared with me as a relatively new author, at least in science fiction, is indicative of her following the playbook and exemplifying many of the best practices that are revealed in Ricci's survey here. So when I got to Comic-Con, she was buttoned up. Everything from bookmarks with her contact info and QR codes. She's got her email mailing list driving the engine of her personal publishing business. She's got amazing cover art. She had her books well done, well edited, well presented. She even takes feedback from her own fans and aligns her books to please. She is a writer who wants to get read, and her goal is more readers, more sales, and she is happily on her way. Now, that's in contrast to your humble podcast host here, who's wanted to be a writer his whole life and feels like he's on a creative winning streak. My book, my science fiction book, my debut novel, was meant to please an audience of one. That is me. I finally wrote the science fiction novel that I always wanted to read. No market research. My niece did the cover, and it was Hell's Bells all the way. Now, all that being said, Ingrid sold at least an order of magnitude more books at LA Comic-Con than I did. But I bring this up at this critical early point in understanding these survey results that there's really two types of writers, especially in indie authorship. There are those who are in it to win it as a business, and those who are treating it like a vanity project. Now, don't get me wrong, I would love to win the Hugo Award and be interviewed by Malcolm Gladwell at the 92nd Street Y in New York. Sure, why not? But it's all about prioritization, and it's all about establishing goals, and it's all about personal satisfaction. And that's outlined in the survey as well. Are you, as a writer, looking for creative fulfillment? And another writer friend of mine in New York put it really well, that if you're in this category, then writing is automatically publishing, and publishing is immediately fulfilling. So whether 5 people or 5,000 read you, buy you, share you, comment on you is secondary, tertiary. It might not even be meaningful at all to you, because you're looking at your writing as this creative outlet, this personal goal that you've always had. And that is, well, 20% of the survey. They just wanted to write the story that they've always wanted to write. Or the 15%, which I think in ways overlaps, that they see writing as a hobby. That amounts to, all told, 35% of writers are in the Mookie Spitz, I write because I love it, let's see what happens, leaving the rest in it to win it one way or another. So how does this break down in terms of the money that's being made? So this was very interesting to me too. 44% earn less than $100 a month on their writing, leaving 56% earning over $100 a month, $1,200 a year. 1 in 5 make from $500 to $5,000 a month, and that's a pretty broad range. Over $5,000 is about 13%. And less than 10%, 8%, 1 in 12 or so earn over $10,000 a month. Assuming, again, that people are reporting accurately as to their success. Now, Ricci is very generous in terms of how she categorizes these segments. She calls those who earn under 100 the early stage group, tacitly assuming that they're getting their feet wet. They haven't published that much. They don't have their own personal email list built up. And they don't spend much, if anything, on the actual marketing. And then she describes the 1,000 to 1,000 a month group as in motion. So they're more serious about it. They're experimenting. They might even toss a few bucks into the marketing. And then she calls the 1,000 a month plus group those with the active email list, they're spending on advertising, and they really consider themselves a business. So I can see this spread playing itself out as well. What's most interesting to me, and I'm going to jump ahead in the survey a little bit, is the marketing spend by income. So these successful authors, the ones making money, some of them even making their careers as independent authors, spend money on advertising. And to me, this was the most eye-opening aspect of the survey. So if you're looking at the survey results, scoot all the way down. This to me is the eye popper of this survey. And I'll go over and talk about some of the other details too. But if you take away anything from this podcast, check this out. For those authors, those indie authors who are making more than $10,000 per month in income, they're spending on average about $4,500 a month on paid advertising. Okay? So 45% of their income is coming from actively promoting their books. In the $5,000 to $10,000 range for monthly spend, it drops. But again, you've got a huge range here, 5 to 10 grand, and they're spending on average about $1,300 a month. So if you look at the low end, it's again a similar kind of ratio. And then when you go to 1,000 to 5,000, $500 a month, and down to, and here's the thing, for those making 100 to 500, they're spending $152 on average per month. So here's the news flash, especially to new and upcoming authors, and I'm looking at myself in the mirror here too. If you want your book to gain any significant traction, and here's the big takeaway, not only gain traction, but sustain it, you gotta feed the beast. It's not like you publish and people recognize how brilliant you are. You publish and you've got to keep pumping it. So just to repeat, for those authors making what could be considered a living off of their books, okay? So if this is accurate, for those over 10 grand a month in income, the average spend is $4,500. And I'm tacitly assuming that it's proportional too, because the numbers seem to match across every tier. If you want to make money as an indie author, paid advertisement is as essential as, we'll cover in a second, a great looking cover, professional editing, and a plan, Stan. So magic doesn't happen, at least not to a vast majority of writers. Now, you could want to be like an Andy Weir, who published The Martian on his own blog, and he had relationships within the engineering and software development community, and that grew pretty much organically. And he grew a large following and readership before his book was even finished, and they contributed to checking the accuracy of some of his hard science fiction. And he built his audience organically on social before The Martian was ever even completed in its original format. That's the exception, not the rule. And then after he got published, he had the engines of the publisher behind him, along with the many thousands of fans he'd already created. So that's a unique situation. And it's possible you could do it too. But the key takeaway that I get from this survey, and not to beat this marketing horse into oblivion, is that you gotta feed the beast. It ain't gonna happen naturally. You can work hard on organic growth, and the survey goes into various techniques and their effectiveness, and I'll talk about those in a second too. But at the end of the day, it's money in and money out. And if you're good at this, and if your book has stickiness to it, then you not only spark your audience, get them interested, and maybe garner a sale. You're building your own personal email list as you do this, but you got to keep pumping in the ads to stay visible across the different channels, most of them, if not all of them, digital, to stay viable. There's a reason that Amazon, Facebook, Meta are multi-trillion-dollar companies. You got to pay to play, baby. And it's true in indie marketing as well. And she makes various conclusions here. So higher earners invest more, as I was describing. Investment tends to rise with income. And she also points out that you don't need to start big, but you need to have this idea that you got to scale up. So you put some ads, you get some sales. Successful writers, authors, take the money that they make off their books and pump it back into advertising. So you got to pay to play. It's a slow build, but everything from Facebook ads to promo stacks, if you can do direct sales, is the way to go. From here, I'd also like to talk about the second most illuminating aspect of this survey, which is email marketing. I didn't really think about this until I was hanging out with Ingrid at LA Comic-Con. And I had signed up to her newsletter, and she had her own promo website, and it looked great. And she regularly updates. I get spammed from Ingrid, and she tells us the progress of the writing of her books and the different events she's doing, and they're a fun little read. But I didn't realize at the time that it's the absolute backbone of your marketing efforts if you take this stuff seriously. And according to the survey here, for those authors making over $10,000 a month, they average 18,000 subscribers. And then it cascades down from there. So 5 to 10K has about 7,500 subscribers. And then it goes down to folks making under $100, only a few sales, handful of sales here and there. And they've even got 902 subscribers. So I don't even feel too bad. I've got about 500 on Substack. And I'm kind of like, hey, where is everybody? And now I see through the lens of what everyone else is dealing with, that having 500, 600, statistically, it's only going to get you so far. And I'm, again, using Substack. And the takeaway here is create your own email marketing engine. Use MailChimp, develop your own website, get people to subscribe into your own proprietary platform if you can, because it really is the backbone for your efforts. It's your go-to. Now, why is email so important? Well, it's still the workhorse of digital marketing. I do multi-channel marketing for clients, and here's an ironic twist to a lot of this is that I'm such a newbie with promoting my own book, and I'm doing it just so half-assed because I just love it so much and I almost don't want to make it a business. But emails still work. It's a direct line to readerships. You're not getting algorithmed out, right? You might get pushed to a spam folder, but they're great for staying on the pulse. This is why Substack shot up in value. It just had an influx of, I think, like $100 million. It also makes it a little bit contentious, but it's your direct poke to your audience, and it's a qualified audience. They have actually taken upon themselves to sign up, which means that there's interest. And then you have an opportunity to keep them excited about new books you're writing, keep them pumped, remind them you exist. It's all about word of mouth being top of mind with email. And the other thing is it scales really, really well. So if you're buying Facebook ads, it's pay to play, right? Pay per click. And with email, once you've set up the infrastructure and once they're signing in, your overhead costs are minimal. And the more folks sign up and into your MailChimp or whatever, actually the cheaper it becomes because your overall foundational costs aren't really growing. So email lists are the other eye opener of this survey if you want to be a successful indie author. So just to summarize, before we cover off on some of the other basics, your book is pretty much, unless you're Andy Weir, going to be dead in the water if you don't start with some paid advertising. And to supplement that paid advertising, you had better create some sort of email list for your fans. Two big takeaways. Next, the survey dives into genres. What kind of writing, indie writing, do these authors get into? And which genres are doing better than others in terms of finding, sustaining, and growing audiences? So among the 1,300 or so authors responding, the largest primary genres were romance at 21%, fantasy 14%, science fiction 8%, thriller 8%, mystery 7%, historical fiction 6%, and lowly nonfiction 6%. That nonfiction percentage frankly surprised me. I would assume documentary style writing, historical narratives, not fiction, would be a larger bucket than this, but I guess not. Authors also cited exotic combo genres that seem to be doing well. Cozy mystery, literary fiction, paranormal romance, children's, women's fiction, that's not surprising, and young adult, of course, YA horror, most definitely, religious fiction, and the like. Now, what's interesting here in terms of over-indexing, Like, which of these were big earners, got the audiences, and got sales? Perhaps not surprisingly, romance, inclusive of all types of romance, is the big winner here. 1 in 5 authors categorize themselves as romance writers, but they consist of over 44% of the over 10K money making group, 38% of the 5 to 10K, 35% of the 1 to 5K, and only about 12% of the under 100 group, those kind of dipping their toes into the indie author business. To me, this is interesting. Romance sells. And with that, presumably, is the dominance of female readers into reading romance. Now, here's something that's surprising right now. There's an upsurge in what could be called paranormal romance, like ghost romance. It's only 4% overall, but over 11% of the big money making over 10K authors are doing this kind of stuff. 2.5 times its presence at the top tier, and less than 3% of paranormal romancers are in the under 300 category. So if you want to go big in indie writing and you're in it to win it as a business to make money, your best statistical shot is to dive right into what's particularly hot right now, which is paranormal romance. Ghosts are sexy. Conversely, at the bottom, children's writing is only 3% overall and less than 6% in the under $100 category. And here's the thing. They don't make much money at all in the upper tiers. This to me is really surprising. Children's books are low prevalence and low reach and low profitability in indie writing. Once again, this seems counterintuitive to me. I would think that more people would be writing children's books, like bedtime story books, simply because they're shorter, lots of pictures, easier to publish. Moms, dads always think of a fun story they want to tell their kids. I know a dozen parents who have talked about writing a kid's book. A couple of them who have, and yet statistically, according to this survey, they're almost non-existent in terms of reach and even in terms of the overall percentage of participation. And equally bleak is literary fiction. Just as sparse. Only in this case, there's awards, traditional coverage, and religious nonfiction is apparently at the bottom of the barrel. 1% of overall writers participate, none in the higher brackets, which is wild. The rest are kind of in between, where you might think they could or should be. Consulting books, nonfiction stuff, training workshops, the business sellers. And in terms of overall volume, again, they kind of snuggle in the middle. They tend to be in the $100 to $1,000 a month bracket, but they don't really make much. Now, here's my theory about this, and this is just me speculating. I think that the children's book people don't make much money because parents want to buy air quote legit, well reviewed, authoritative, respected, filtered children's books. If you're a mom, you want your kids to have the very best, and you're not going to trust any other source except for arguably the big publishers, right? So you're not going to go to Amazon to get some unknown author's children book to read to your kid unless you are friends and family, right? And you're not going to go shopping on Amazon to pick up an independent book for your kid. You're going to go to the publishers who specialize in this stuff. That's my theory. Same for literary fiction. The awards go far for this, but if a book doesn't have that kind of cred, then it might be considered crud. And there are air quote legit or traditional publishers who go wild with literary fiction and children's. And the same rules apply to religious nonfiction. So once again, here's where the indie traditional publishing divide manifests itself in terms of what's considered legit and authoritative for all sorts of different reasons. Now, young adult is kind of its own thing too, and that crosses a few boundaries. So 2.5% of overall authors are young adult. Just under 4% are in the 100 to 500 earning range monthly. And there's hardly any young adult in the top brackets. And I would say same rules apply. So in summary, if you're an author and you want to make some money, then romance, paranormal romance, and even cozy mystery currently are hot. And people like new authors in these areas. I would also speculate that they're reading so voraciously that they literally run out of this stuff from the traditional publishers, and they don't care. They just go for it. They gobble this stuff up. And for indie authors, these are viable. And now, what about fantasy, sci-fi, historical fiction, mystery? There's a few high earners here, but it's also relatively sparse compared to these other categories. The ones who make it, though, based on this survey, write a lot. They've got a series, they publish consistently, and they go sub genre. So, for example, and I'm just making this up, lesbian cowgirls in space. Now, presumably there's a niche for that or variations of that, but that'll sell. And that's got the long tail appeal that could work for targeting and custom targeting. And it also has the long tail, which traditional publishers will de facto reject because it takes them a lot of capital investment to publish a book. Whereas an indie author, as I've just described, you just need a PDF in about an hour and a half, and you are a published indie author. So there are no guarantees, but if you're in it to win it, the coast is clear and the path is paved. If you happen to like to write paranormal romance and cozy mysteries, then 2025 into 2026 is your year. And of course, if you've got intentionality, then then you need to take advantage of that. Now, the next interesting nugget here is the category of catalog size. Like, how many books have been published and how much do these folks earn? And there's a correlation. Contrary to the notion that I'm going to write my great American novel and then win the Pulitzer and retire in Vermont, if you're under $100, chances are you have 10 or less books out there. And conversely, if you're over 10 grand, then the average number of books published by you as an indie author, get this, is over 60. 60 books. So what this is communicating to me is the antidote to the overnight sensation, at least in terms of the hopes and dreams of the new author. If you're looking to turn writing into a career for yourself, then get started. Because once again, if you've got, based on this survey, less than 30 books out there, chances are you're making less than $1,000 a month. And this is not counting the amount of money that you need to put into advertising to generate that revenue. Remember? So for authors making over 10 grand, they are spending on average $4,500, 45% on advertising to sustain that level of sales. So two things are evident here. You need a big catalog. This is a mini library, folks. 60 books published plus to make that kind of big old coin. And almost half of that revenue going into paid advertising per month to keep that juggernaut going. So Ricci breaks it down here too. Authors with 1 to 3 books, 80% fall under $100 a month. 5 to 9 books, $50 a month. Lots of books, series of books. The other thing that's obvious here is if you're spending $100 to promote one book, they can buy one book. If you've got a 10-book series and you advertise that $100, then they might buy a bunch of books. And you might be able to build up a long-term fan. Remember that email mailing list? That's got to be the backbone of all this stuff. So get writing and get publishing, get committed, because you really need to want to do this if you are even going to make a marginal income as an independent author. Then the survey goes into the formats, what's popular. Now, just about 100% put out ebooks in this industry, with paperbacks close behind. About half have audiobook versions, and there are hardback and collector's editions, but those are more rare and skew to more established authors. Audiobooks are expensive and they're time-consuming to make. They're distributed on different channels, but as a longer-term investment might be viable. Hardbacks are kind of coming in, collector's editions, but it all depends on you, the author. Do they know who you are? Do they care? Are they a fan? Do they want to invest in you? Now, where are indie authors publishing? It seems to be a two-horse race here, which is KDP or Amazon and everyone else. About just under 40% of indie writers are all of their stuffs on Amazon. About 30% are everything but Amazon. They hate the Bezos. And the rest are a mix. And if you look at the earners, about 40% are all on Amazon. And 15% were the Bezos haters. So when you're looking at the money, honey, especially for over $5,000 a month, you got to play ball with the Bezos, it looks like. Now, as we've seen, Amazon, the rest of them, take a big chunk of profits, like a really big chunk. Printing costs, shipping costs. So based on the survey, about 30% of all writers are selling direct from their own website or store. And the higher the earner, the more they're selling direct. But this could be a bit of a tease for writers who are just starting out. When you're just starting out, you want to maximize profit. You want to be the big gunslinger in town, letting everyone know you're there, and then laughing all the way to the bank. But chances are you'll be crying because no one knows who the hell you are. And if you're selling from your own site, as just about all folks know, especially in digital marketing, websites are dying. And that's especially true in the age of AI. People don't go to websites because less and less people are even Googling. And how the hell are they going to find you? They can find you through an ad. And where's the ad placed? Well, on Facebook, wherever people already are. And then what? You're going to take them to your website. You can kill two birds, get them to sign up to your email list, get them to buy your book direct. But then you're not only circumventing the commissions that are going to Mr. Bezos, but you're circumventing all the traffic that's already on Amazon. And frankly, Amazon, which started as a bookseller, remains one of the planet's biggest booksellers. People who are shopping, whether it's paranormal romance or historical nonfiction, tend to lurk on Amazon. So you're going to miss all that traffic. And you need to rely 100% on your own advertising rather than the search engine of some of these established publishing platforms. That's one of the reasons that they milk us. Accessibility and reach. Now, the converse can also be true if you're the 10,000 above seller. You've got 60 plus books, you've got a fan base, you've got an email list with an average of over 18,000 people on it. People know who you are, they're expecting your work, they track you with your newsletter. They are a fan. You have worked your way into the indie publishing world, you have a reputation, and you're going for it. Well, then it's a whole lot easier to just sell direct, right? You've got a captive audience that you've earned the hard way. But for writers just starting out, might not be such a good idea. The next thing to think about here is cover design. Now, from my own experience, this was really vivid. Ingrid Moon, remember my partner at LA Comic-Con, she was cranking it with her covers. Her covers are exciting. I noticed people who otherwise wouldn't come to our table came to our table because they saw the covers of her books. They touched them. They came up and they touched her books. I could tell they were imagining her colorful covered books on their bookshelf, in their bedroom, in their living room. They were judging her books by their cover. And the data from the survey reveals that that's no accident. Now, authors spend money on covers. We're in the age of AI and it gets sketchy. But when you're looking at mid-range earners, for example, those making less than $1,000 a month, they'll go as high as $500 for a cover of a single book. And the high-end earners can go as high as $1,000. And they all seem to spend some kind of money. A few go as high as spending $2,000 on a cover. So they don't mess around. They understand that books sell by their cover. And this is true not only at book fairs with people walking around, but arguably it's even more important at online platforms and ads. When people are scrolling through their social medias and they come across a book, that cover's gotta grab them. And they even share best practices here in the survey. So for example, for sci-fi, you want a dark background, bold serif text, and a spaceship on it. Sci-fi. That's Ingrid stuff, frankly. And for, rom-com stuff, pastel illustration, cute fonts, urban fantasy and thrillers, a moody figure and a city skyline. Now, all of this sounds really cliche, doesn't it? But the reason it's cliche is because it's often true and works. They do research, big companies. It's no accident that McDonald's looks and feels like it does. Hundreds of millions of dollars have poured into that generic McDonald's experience. Why? Because it's been proven to work. You go to your grocery store, big bucks are spent in how products are arranged on the shelves, the lighting. Companies will spend millions on deciding how a store should smell. This stuff makes an enormous difference. So if you're in it to win it again, and this is a business for you, you got to get your covers right. Now, back to me, your humble podcaster here. I had my niece, Lou, do the cover of my science fiction book, and once again, I love it. It's weird. It looks like the cover to what could be a book of poetry, or even a young adult book that's kind of zany. It's got a Roald Dahl kind of feel to it. It's graphic. It's a little bit risque. It's got bongs and dice and cigars and cards and chips. It's got a black cat and a white cat. It's got a bathtub. It's weird. So the feedback that I got at the Comic-Con was that it looks kind of cool, but no one was drawn to it. No one was like, wow, this is a cool cover. And no one was drawn to the book to the point where they grab the book and they want to look in there and they want to read it and see what's going on. They just kind of saw it in the background and considered it an oddity or a curiosity. Not that much of an attention getter. So here's the irony behind all this. And I have to quote my favorite designer, Louis. You might not have heard of him, but you're familiar with his work, no doubt. He's the guy who changed Esso oil, E-S-S-O, into Exxon. He's the guy who designed the Avante car, which was really the first mass-produced car that was asymmetrical. It had like the line down the middle of the hood was off to one side of the car. It was amazing, way ahead of its time. This guy designed logos and cars and clothes. And he had a phrase which he relied on all the time, and he, it was an acronym. It was Maya. Most advanced yet acceptable. So you want to titillate your audience. You want to keep them surprised. That's the most advanced part. It's surprising. It's attention getting. Yet acceptable. Maya, M-A-Y-A. Acceptable means that you don't blow a fuse. You don't burn the bacon. The best bacon is super crispy bacon, but if you leave it on the stove for 20 seconds more, it's over the top and it's ruined. And it's the same thing with design. You can't mess around with this stuff. People easily get disrupted to the point where the innovation turns into annoyance, or it's off category. When people come and they're at the Comic-Con and they're interested in buying a science fiction book, then you buy Ingrid Moon's Handler's Gambit, and you don't buy Mookie Spitz's Johnny Fazuli and the Transfinite Reality Engine. You just don't. That's because Ingrid's books are Maya. And Mookie's book is most advanced yet unacceptable. And it's not even advanced, it's just not in category. Will I change the cover of my book? No, I love it. Why? Because I'm not in this to make money. I'm in this to gain personal satisfaction for myself. So why am I going through this survey? Well, maybe I could find some kind of balance between doing things like Frank Sinatra my way and actually selling a few books. I am a Gemini after all. And I'm also fascinated by the marketing aspect, even though so far I suck at it. We can always be better people, right? We can explore the untapped side of ourselves. But I digress. Anyway, covers make a big difference. Now, in the age of AI, a lot of people are do-it-yourself. But again, a best practice is get feedback. Ingrid got feedback. She had several covers that were designed for her that she tweaked, and she went to her fans and said, which one do you like? I am going to be in S.A. Gibson's science fiction anthology for 2026. And that's actually a result of being at the LA Comic-Con, because Steve came by our booth seeing that we were science fiction authors, gave us his card and said, hey, if you got a short story, you could submit it to my anthology. And I did that. And it was a great networking opportunity. Loved it. I networked with Anand Gandhi, the guy who directed and I believe produced Ship of Theseus back in 2011, 2012. Speaking of Maya, he had the Maya book that's coming out, where apparently he consulted with an army of engineers, scientists, and artists to write the ultimate fantasy book with an audio book by none other than Hugo Weaving, and he swung by our booth. And I networked with him too, and I invited him on this podcast or another podcast, my science fiction podcast. Let's see if he'll go for it. But networking is important, and I love doing that. And going to these Comic-Cons is super fun. And I'm paying some attention, But I'm happy to share this with you because you make up your own mind. You decide what you want to do. But I think these facts, statistically at least, are incontrovertible. You just can't swim upstream. If you want to play ball, learn the rules of the game. And at least at the near top is having a great cover. It's got to work for you. Now, what about editing? Editing your content. This one is not proportional to income, and the spend varies a lot. Now, about a third of authors don't pay for editing. And some go heavy on editing, like 5%. 1 in 20 authors are spending more than $2,000 to edit their books. Not surprisingly, the high-end authors pay for editing. And here it's a little bit proportional in terms of, obviously, if folks have no real money and they're just getting started, the last thing they're going to do is spend $2,000 on editing their book. But there is a point where these cross over. So the sweet spot for editing, putting money in editing, is that mid-range spend. They'll spend anywhere from $250 to about $1,000 for editing. And this is obviously common among the bigger earners. So what does this mean as far as wanting to make your content the highest established quality that you can? Well, have professional eyeballs look at it. And the big takeaway here is not surprising. The cover is going to sell your book, and the editing will keep them coming back. So if your book has just typos in it, like syntactically it's a mess, people are going to wonder why they're paying bucks for this, and it's going to call into question your abilities as a writer. Now, that's not necessarily true. Apparently, Quentin Tarantino's screenplays, his early ones, were written phonetically, like the, T-H-U-H, something like that. No kidding. And clearly he's done pretty well for himself in terms of writing screenplays. But the cover means a lot, and even a quick scan of the text means a lot. So you want few to no typos, you want it clean, and then you want the narrative to flow. And one element which this survey leaves out is pre-reads. So editing is one thing. You get a professional to look at it. You pay anywhere from $49 to $2,000. But what Ingrid does, and what a lot of writers will do, is get beta readers. So they'll gather, ideally, some of their fans, and they'll say, you know what, my new book is coming out. I'll give you a free copy if you give this a read and then provide me some feedback. That's brilliant. And Ingrid does this with enthusiasm to the point where she's actually changed her narrative and tweaked scenes to accommodate fans who are like, wait a second, I'm not quite sure what happens here in the narrative. And then she'll look at it and go, okay, I'll provide a little bit more detail, and then she'll fill it in. That is cool. Do I do that? Did I do that with my book? No. How much did I spend on editing? Nothing. How many beta readers did I have? 0. Now you're going to ask me, how many books have I sold? And I'm going to grin. Did it get beyond friends and family? All right, so we've covered the nuts and bolts of this stuff, indie publishing. Let's circle back to marketing here. And we've talked about investment, which I thought was important to bring up early. And now let's tie a knot on it in terms of the tactics that authors have found to be most effective. Now, at the top of that list, cost notwithstanding, hassle notwithstanding. We're talking about efficacy here. On a scale of 1 to 5, the email list is at the top at 3.3. Promo sites like Free Booksy get points. Book deals, lead magnets, Facebook ads, Amazon ads, newsletter swaps are all there in diminishing efficacy. Down to about, for newsletter swaps, about 3 or actually 2.5 out of 5. So that's barely a passing grade, maybe. That's a C minus. So once again, email lists at the top. Promo sites like Free Booksy. Those seem to be popular and work. BookBub deals, lead magnets, Facebook ads start to get sketchy. Amazon ads, even sketchier than Facebook ads. Now, as we mentioned, what's working best is that email list. Now, promo sites actually seem to be doing all right. And these include, like I mentioned, Free Booksy, Bargain Booksy, BookBub. Check those out if you want to make your book available. And then Amazon ads are sketchier actually than Facebook ads, so watch out. Now, some people have used Kickstarter. I know that Anand Gandhi, the well-known director, writer, pushing Maya, was in the throes of finalizing his Kickstarter. And this guy, I believe I checked it just last week, he got $471,000 on his Kickstarter. That's not too bad. Now, for some, it's a huge success, like Anand. But for others, it's a dud. And I could see this being a dud. If I would have done a Kickstarter for my book, I would have gotten 10 people who loved me to throw a few dollars, and that's it. If they don't know who the hell you are, you're starting from scratch, and you're trying to build up without building up a following first. So it's kind of back-asswards, if you ask me. If nobody knows you as an author, why are they going to throw money at you so that you write your damn book? Now, the exception here could be, let's say, a soccer mom writing her first paranormal romance, okay? She is everyone's darling. She's the PTA mom. And within her circle, she's got 500 people. And I know women like this. 500 people, no exaggeration, no Cindy Yoo-hoo of Whoville. And she's writing her paranormal romance book, and she's doing a Kickstarter to help fund it. She will make 10, 20 grand on her Kickstarter to get her book up. No question about it. But unless you are a social network kind of person, friends and family here, maybe a few colleagues, it's not going to work for you. Conversely, if you're Anand Gandhi and you have a big reputation in the arts, in cinema, and you manage to get Hugo Weaving, okay, the agent from The Matrix, the Elven King from Lord of the Rings, and the list goes on. Hugo is awesome. You get him to voice the audiobook, and you drive forward with that, and you do clips of Hugo reading the damn book's draft. You very well might get $500,000 on your Kickstarter. So a lot of this is just sheer common sense. I mean, are you able to... You can't build popularity by wanting to build popularity, and you can't fund something from nowhere. And that just makes sense to me. as someone who's doing it all wrong. Now, the next little category here is just to dive into the number one most efficacious way to sell books, which is your email list. So they share some best practices here, which is pretty cool, which is run promos, drive direct sales, nurture your super fans. You know, you have a personal relationship with these folks. Do promotions and connect consistently with your readers. You have a fan base. They love you. You've worked hard to get them. Water those plants. Now, the survey ends in a cool way. And it asks indie authors how they feel about doing what they're doing. And several themes came up, which is not surprising. And I want to end at the beginning or begin at the end by bringing up burnout and the feeling that I'm the only one who's going through this and I suck, especially for writers who are starting out with this. And that was pervasive. It's just me and my keyboard. I'm burned out and I feel like I'm just lost in the desert. The other aspect of this is, and this is prevalent among almost all the writers that I know personally, including myself, which is they love writing or they write for whatever reason they write, and they're good at it, or at least do it and do it well to the point they keep doing it. But the marketing aspect doesn't come naturally. I like to cite how James Joyce used to write about two brothers, and they became two of the characters in the incomprehensible Finnegan's Wake. And they were Shem and Sean. And Shem wrote the book and Sean marketed the book. Only issue was Shem just kept to himself and knew all about the word, but no one really understood the word or was exposed to it. And then Sean would set up the pulpit or the soapbox and proselytize Shem's ideas, but Sean had no idea what Shem was talking about, so it became something wholly different. And archetypally, that's kind of the conflict here, where writers who like to write usually aren't good at marketing, and writers who are good at marketing aren't even really writers, they're just good marketers. But the whole point of this survey, and especially with an ostensibly introverted, Shem-like writer taking you through it, is that, as I'm saying, you're not alone in terms of encountering these obstacles, being wiped out, feeling like the algorithm hates you, and just feeling like, what's the point here? But also fueled by this optimism that I'm a writer and I'm doing it and I'm making it. And then, oh, I got this little success and that's enough to catapult me into the next stage, even if there's a string of miserable losses or failures. So whatever it is that fuels this insane profession, if we could call it, obsession is probably more like it, even if it's just a hobby, is this duality and is the synergy that's necessary to write a good book, get a pretty cover on it, and then get it in front of people, market it, push it out into the world. You got to hustle a little bit. You have no choice, especially now. And what makes it so easy and immediate to actually have a beautiful published book sitting on your desk that you have written with its own ISBN number, I got to tell you, it's a thrilling thing to just do this, to have your own book that you have written. Dream come true. But if no one gives a shit except your friends and family who did you a favor by buying the damn thing And the only reason that they know about it is because you told them about it. And the only reason that they bought it was to do you that favor. If you ever want to be more than that, then you have no choice but to at least in part not only dip your toes, but dive in swimming into this mess of digital marketing for indie book publishing. One way or another, you could start a podcast. You could reach out to people. You could submit for award ceremonies or award contests. And I'm going to cover off on that in a second too. But you got to do something. And sure, you could settle into just friends and family, have this secret in-pocket kind of hope that you will be, air quote, discovered someday. And a lot of writers can actually sustain themselves. And frankly, I'm more or less sustaining myself with that. Less so even this idea of being discovered, and more so as I just have the story in my head and I have to get it out there. And now I know how to publish, and I know how to reach out to people. I know how to share it. I know how to podcast about it. I know how to talk about it. Now I'm learning how to market it through this exercise too. How much of these best practices will I adopt? How much of a success will I accomplish? Well, part of me is thinking of not only writing my weird sci-fi books with cats and bathtubs and shit on the cover, but writing stuff that could sell actually. And I have a book about dating, about male sexuality, believe it or not, based on a blog post that I published on Medium during the pandemic that continues to get several hundred reads every month, that I'm thinking of converting into a indie book and following the rules here. Maybe not too rigorously, because I'm just not a planner. You know, they had that Strength Finder survey that companies sometimes had employees do. And it was actually really cool. I think the Gallup company bought it. And what it did was it turned the old idea about self-improvement and training upside down. So the old view of that was, you know what? I have these 3 things that I'm really good at as an employee. And I also have these 3 things that I just suck at. And the old view was, well, I'm going to spend a lot of time and effort to get the 3 things I suck at least to baseline. Go for it. And what this Strength Finder program advocated, and I think convincingly, was forget about the 3 things that you're bad at. You don't need to worry about those because you suck at it, you don't like doing it, and you might as well just focus on the things that you're great at and do those because you love doing it. And if you love doing it, you're going to do more of it. And if you do more of it, you're going to do even more of it, a positive feedback loop. So focus on the 3 things you're great at and make it even more fantastic. And I love that. That is really a cool way of approaching it. So with that spirit, it's like, why should I kill myself to try to market a book that's a hard sell, that has a niche audience, and that'll take off? Truly, if I get a little lucky and if I find some folks who get it for that niche market, and apply a lot of these best practices, these proven best practices, to content that I know will be eagerly absorbed by a target audience, a wide target audience, not a quirky cross-genre target audience. And that fills me with this optimism too. And, there's a few bullets here that are inspirational too. Authors are proud of their books. Many are seeing results, and there's a strong desire to keep going. And in my sense, it's not just keep going, but you know what? If your book is weird and it's really hard to find your niche, then write a book that's more clear, that's Maya, that most advanced yet acceptable. and acknowledge that you're not alone. I'm not alone. Everyone's working on this. Everyone is struggling with feeling lonely and being a little lost and wondering, why the hell did I choose to be an indie author? Well, here we are. Why do people ever do what they do? And the answer to that is, who the hell knows? Just do it. And if you can, do it well. And if you can't even do it well, then just have fun. Because if you can't have fun, then what's the point of doing a deal, right? And then there's the overarching summary here, which is worth summarizing. Email is the engine. Email. You need an email list. Build it. Sell through the email. Write a lot of books. Generate series of books. You need a lot of books to get out there. The covers. Covers got to be cool and arresting and fun. Publish on Amazon. Don't publish on Amazon. Create your own website. Don't create your own website. Some of that is secondary to the first three, but experiment. See what works for you. And direct sales, where you can keep most of the profits, makes sense, but you've already got to be cranking to make that happen, because you're unplugging yourself from trillion-dollar companies that make your book at least accessible through search, right? And the big takeaway for me, and I need to repeat this again just so I can hear it, is the big earners especially do a huge percentage of advertising. You got to pay to play. And you got to keep winging it and stay flexible. And you can't just do one thing. Like, I'm going to spend a shit ton of money on Facebook ads. Or I'm going to put my books on a promo site. You just really need to do all this kind of stuff. And then keep writing. Let's see what happens. And I'm having fun with this. This whole exercise, not really in my wheelhouse or my comfort zone, even though professionally, I've been doing digital marketing strategy, content strategy, brand strategy for big brands in healthcare for 20 years. That's been my bread and butter. And late in life here, I am going off the reservation, like, woo, with my indie writing, with my blogging, with my podcasting. Check me out, Mookie Spitz on Substack. I've got like 1,000 pieces of content up there in all these different categories, essays, short stories. I'm just pumping this stuff out. I'm very much a Shem. I need to be more of a Sean. I need to tell you to go to my Substack. I need to remind people to like, comment, and share. I need to create my own email list, which is outside of even Substack's list, so I can build my fan base. I need to write a book that people actually want to read. They might not give a shit about me. They certainly won't give a shit about the kitty cats in the bathtub and the bongs and the cards and my science fiction book. I just need to embrace a lot of these best practices in a way that could get me on the map, so to speak, and also keep working on my lovely, lovely science fiction series, The Lover's Guide to the Infiniverse. And there's no reason that The Lover's Guide to the Infiniverse can't generate its own level of success. But that's going to take time too. And I need to connect to an audience who understands the very quirky content and style that I've adopted for this book. It's very unconventional. That much I have learned in the 6 months that it's been published. And it's not just my friends and family like looking at me and going, WTF, but a lot of folks feel that way. And that segues me to this idea of getting reviews, getting attention through reviews and awards. Now, you might be familiar with Kirkus reviews, and it's actually a pay-to-play review service. Now, for years, I saw Kirkus reviews, Norman Mailer, whatever. You pay like many hundreds of dollars for an air quote professional reviewer to review your book. And then you get a Kirkus review. And if they really like your book, it could be noteworthy and they could really shower you with some praise. And I have read, not to say anything negative about Kirkus reviews in general, or in particular, or pay to review in general. But if your book sucks, well, you just paid a few $100 and, maybe they'll just provide a nice summary of your book. But you see, it's like you need to pump money into ads to get the book to sell, and you need to pump money into reviews too to get attention. Now, not all reviews are like this, of course. And I have submitted my science fiction book to some science fiction magazines. Let's see if they pick it up, they read it. Who knows what can come out of that? Okay. Ingrid Moon, my buddy at LA Comic-Con, recommended that I submit my book to the Outstanding Creator Awards, which is another pay-to-review kind of website award. It's a marketing engine led by a relatively small team of folks, and they've got their own website, and you get a review of your book, and then it's thrown into the hat, so to speak, the Harry Potter hat. And then they have endless categories of winners. First, second, third place for books based on category, genre. First, second, third, honorary mention for best characters. Just about every single way you can slice and dice accolades for books, this platform has done it. And then they appear on all sorts of Facebook groups to announce your book being included in one of the champions of the Outstanding Creator Awards for the year. And then they'll have a little blurb, a non-judgmental blurb on all these promotional sites that comes with your $85. And then they'll rank you. They'll rank the top authors, etc., etc. Now, my pal Ingrid Moon kicked ass. They loved her stuff. Why is that not surprising? Especially since, as I've been bloviating, how much Ingrid is conscientious about getting the cover right, getting her book professionally edited, namely by her. She's a professional editor who actually edits for other writers. Beta testing your book with beta readers, actually tweaking your content based on reader feedback, etc., etc. So they loved Ingrid. And she won first place for 2 of the 3 books in her Saxon series this year. And then the first book won the year previous. And they literally came out and said her trilogy is their favorite science fiction trilogy. And I did a podcast with her celebrating her win, and it was glorious. It was awesome. Now, based on everything I've been talking about for following the rules and not, how do you think Fazuli did? Well, poorly. So I got some honorable mentions, some second and third places. And the review did give the book credit. There were some adjectives including brainy and glorious, that it was a lot like a concept album, that if you're into that kind of stuff, you go deep. But if you're not really into the band, then you just listen to a few seconds and you're like, WTF. All of these observations in my review were fair. All of these are correct. But the one point they made, which I felt was unfair, just for the record, is that they called my baby a mess. They said that it's a mess. And my pushback regarding that is, if something is disruptive and complex and intricate to the point that you are WTF, then it might not be inherently a mess, but it seems like a mess to you because you don't know what the F is going on. And again, it's fair. They were judging it based on criteria that was different than how you would judge, let's say, even early William Gibson, let alone Thomas Pynchon. So they did not get it. And I noticed in the review that I could tell my book was handed off. A reviewer got my book. Oh, here's Johnny Fazuli and the Transfinite Reality Engine. Let me check it out. And after about 60 pages, they were WTF. And they went to the boss and they said, I don't know what to do with this book. This is so weird. Can you help me out? And then the boss, or a more senior reviewer, looked at it and pretty much concluded the same thing. And I can't tell if they went to ChatGPT or Grok or Claude to give some kind of machine learning intelligence to this analysis, but they came up with the gist of what they thought, or the LLM thought the book is about. And they kind of got aspects of it right, and other aspects they completely missed, because I don't think either reviewer actually read the thing. It's that kind of an experience. So again, I'm not knocking them. I think they gave it their best shot. I think it was completely out of their wheelhouse. Many aspects of the review, again, are fair, but I take issue with the messy part, because that implies chaos and recklessness and a lack of attention, and it's quite the opposite. It was an obsessive attention to intricacy and detail. The book might be excessive, and they point that out. The last lines are too much of a good thing, which I appreciate. And that's true if you don't like that thing, which they also acknowledge. But it ain't messy. It's spicy. But I bring all this up because it reinforces everything that this survey covers, which is, my cover made no sense. The title, even when I was at LA Comic Con, people were it's Johnny Fazuli and the what engine? Transfinite? That's a math term. Most people don't know math terms. Most people have never heard transfinite before. Maya? No. Most advanced yet unacceptable. And then even the formatting of my book, which was another, not an issue I took with this paper review. And I don't mean to dwell on it, but I'm just using it to illustrate that this survey is so correct. You need to follow the rules if you want to benefit from them. And of course, my book is an outlier, which is the whole damn point. But my entire book is written in 3-line paragraphs. And the reviewers observed that they just felt that sentences were too long, which I'm like, how could the sentences be too long? There's not even enough room in a 3-line paragraph to make the sentence too long. And there weren't enough breaks. So they had trouble with just the structure, but they didn't even observe to the reader of this review the unique structure of my book. It's just taken for granted, and it's just a mess. Anyway, I got what I paid for. And I appreciate them trying. And they reinforce that rules need to be followed if you want to benefit from them. And will I follow the rules, at least in terms of changing the syntax, my approach to the content, the density of the writing, the approach to the narrative, the style, the characters for the sequel? Because this is one book of at least 5 for the series. And the answer is absolutely not. I will not. Not because I'm just stubborn and it's an FU to the world and an FU, frankly, to many of the best practices in this proven list, but I need to do it my way. I just love this too much. And remember I brought up Andy Weir? There is the one in a million. And whether or not the book ever pops, like it can get to the audience that I know would love it, is in a sense secondary to my thrill in just being able to do it and to love it and to love my own content. Because I know if I love my content, there's got to be some peoples out there who will love it too. And that to me is the biggest takeaway of all this, which is whether or not you consider this a business and whether or not you are in it to win it for the money, the fame, or even just the self-satisfaction like I am indulging in, you just need to go for it and need to enjoy the overall process. And whether your focus skews toward the creativity and the writing, Ingrid mentioned on my podcast with her celebrating her Outstanding Creator Award win, was that her favorite was creating quirky, interesting characters and letting them loose. And I believe it. She loves that. She also wants to be a famous writer, and God bless her. And would I want to be a famous writer? Would I want to win that Hugo Award? Well, sure, give it to me, baby. I'd love that. But that pales in comparison to me just actually loving a book that I have written. Because that to me is the most glorious thing after decades and decades, and especially the more recent 3-4 years of just heavy writing, daily writing, immersive, dedicated writing, to writing the novel of my dreams, the novel I always wanted to do. And if I could combine the two, which is content that I love with something that can convert into what could be considered even a fledgling career, then bring it on. And that's why I've indulged myself and shared with you the results of this survey to see what the other writers are thinking and doing. And when you look at it, it's your classic bell curve, right? Different strokes for different folks. Find your voice, find where you fit in, determine your own level of commitment, and do your best and go for it and have fun with it. And I just feel blessed, and I want to share my gratitude for being a part of all this, whether I succeeded this aspect of it or not, and all the terrific people I've met along the way, including Ingrid. I quoted Greg Sorber earlier on. I'm going to Pasadena Comic-Con January 25th. That's the next Comic-Con, Sunday, January 25th. Hanging out with Ingrid, Greg, and Blake and Sherry Shimshock. I have done a podcast with them. They're 2 wonderful science fiction writers. And there you have a couple. They're a couple who have been together since the 80s. They met in astronomy class. And you could feel their chemistry and their affection for each other. And Blake has the wild ideas, and Sherry loves to write and get it all down, and they are a wonderful team of writers. And then I go back full circle to, I call them the Daniels. Daniel P. Douglas, Paul and Phil Garver, the identical twins. Their middle name, Daniel. Their first initial, P. Maiden name, Douglas. Woohoo! They are terrific too, and they work together as a team. I'm meeting some fascinating people who are indie writers and getting into it and dedicating themselves to the craft. I mean, most people we know, they just love to kick back and watch Netflix, and they're bored a lot of the time. There's never a dull moment when you're an indie writer. Not all of it's fun, but, with the help of this kind of survey, we're not alone, and there's always room to grow, and you always have to keep changing, and, well, hey, better get that email list going. Thanks for listening to Ink versus Algorithm. This was a mixture of both Ink and Algorithm in a super fun way, I think. The Writers Pod. And I'll be bringing more writers on. I also have the sister podcast to this, the Science Fiction and Fantasy Factory, where I've had all the authors I mentioned as guests already. So you can check that out. And see you at Pasadena Comic-Con, if you can make it. And let's see how the Fazuli does, and I'll let you know as soon as I launch the sequel, hopefully in summer of 2026. Trying to get a book every year out. And this male sex dating book, that'll definitely have to have a mailing list on that. Thanks for listening.